Hello, as many of you know, this is Dr. Bart, and as still further of you might know, I'm often asked to talk about Boethius, and so, of course, I'm going to start this little bit of sharing with you to talk about Boethius, a Roman senator in the very latest period of the Romans, in which they were ruled by Theodoric, who was a German princeling sent by the Byzantines to rule the Italian peninsula in the Byzantine emperor's absence, essentially. We want to think about historical context when we think about the times that we're living in right now. Certainly, it is vexatious to meet on Zoom, to have the interferences of technology impose themselves between us and our friendships and our discussions. But Boethius, whose personal ambition was to assimilate and quantify the philosophies of Plato and Aristotle first into the Latin language and then to harmonize the two of them, because he firmly believed they could be harmonized and brought into one whole. He had that ambition and his study group and his library cut short and destroyed by being arrested for being a Roman patriot and trying to get the Byzantines to come back and rule in the Italian peninsula. He was sent to prison. Within about a year or so, he was executed. And in the time that he was in prison, he spent the time writing The Consolation of Philosophy, in which he pondered the role of the liberal arts, particularly of philosophy, but of all the liberal arts in human life and the meaning of human life when it can be so interrupted, so disrupted, so destroyed by someone who doesn't understand the first thing about the liberal arts. This work was then translated by another man famously, Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great was the surviving son of the king of the West Saxons. He was a younger brother, but his brothers died. And as he rose to be king, a great heathen army, as it is called, of Vikings roared its way across England, murdered all of the other kings, but Alfred himself, and Alfred was eventually driven into a swamp, essentially. It's called a fen. The British always have a nice name for things, but it was a swamp. And he lived on an island in the swamp for a time with a few of his loyal men, and they fought their way back out. All this time that Alfred was suffering in this way, essentially, if you will put yourself into that position, essentially as though you had to live in the Arb right now by the lily pond and do your work there. He was longing to establish the study of the liberal arts in his country. This was his end goal. His end goal wasn't actually defeating the Viking army, though he did that. He managed to fight his way out and do that. In the history of the English-speaking peoples, Sir Winston Churchill speaks of high praise of Alfred. It's said by many that he called him the greatest Englishman who ever lived. Dr. Arnn and others who have been looking around for that quotation cannot find it anywhere, so it would appear to be a bit of a historical canard, but certainly he is the only British monarch who was ever referred to as the Great. And Sir Winston Churchill, in the history of the English-speaking peoples, admired him greatly. Churchill, as you will recall, was rather inconvenienced by another homicidal horde of maniacs who roared their way across Europe, murdering people. And as a concluding note, in this chat with you today about our situation, again, which is very vexatious, I'd like to introduce to you my German teacher from high school. She was a Holocaust survivor. Her name was Edith Goodman Stein. She was allowed to graduate early from high school and was sent to Los Angeles to live with an uncle there. Her parents were murdered at Auschwitz. Her brother survived the concentration camp, but was embittered for the rest of his life. Frau Stein, however, taught us German, and she taught us to love beautiful things, and she taught us that the Nazis weren't the end all and the be all of German culture. That woman had guts. That woman's education was interrupted in a way that yours is unlikely to be. And so that's the message I'd like to deliver today. Bear up, be bold, be resolute, be Americans, rise to self government, do the right thing.